It's been over 50 years since RTV of Spain last hosted a Eurovision event, but they did so last weekend when they hosted the Junior Eurovision 2014 in Madrid. 17 wonderful acts performed, but the show itself left us with many questions, lots of confusion, and a show that made even the most hardcore Chanel fans believe that maybe it was for the better that Spain didn't win Eurovision back in 2022. Let's talk about it all. It's been about a week now since the Junior Eurovision 2024, so let's talk about it. Today I want to talk about the good, I want to talk about the bad, I want to talk about the songs, and of course, the changes, the many changes that we saw to the contest this year. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I was actually quite excited when the hosting was handed over to Spain. I loved what France has done both in Paris in 2021 and what they did in Nice last year, but it is always nice to see another country take on hosting duties. It is one of the, at least from my perspective, at least one of the coolest things about the Eurovision Song Contest is that we get to go all around Europe, see all these different countries, see how they tackle something like the Eurovision Song Contest or the Junior Eurovision in this case. So I also completely understand why French TV didn't want to host it once again. So I think it was very nice that RTV of Spain were given the opportunity. I feel like there was also a lot of hype around, a lot of hype before this contest. If you've been in the Eurovision fandom for a while, you know that the Spanish fans are some of the most passionate fans, that's for sure. I feel like many of us, myself included, have wondered for a long time, what would a Eurovision hosted in Spain be like after all these years? Well, I guess we found out now, and it wasn't exactly what we expected. I'm not gonna beat around the bush, I'm not gonna try to hide it. This production looked horrible. I feel like this show could be described as the Turin special. I'm of course referring to when Turin hosted the Eurovision Song Contest in 2022. And we got some of the elements that we saw that year as well, including the dirty floors, production crew, and sometimes cameras in the shot, and just in general awkward and weird camera angles. Of course, we see this in Eurovision from time to time, but I feel like it was especially bad this time. There were a lot of wrong camera cuts, it looked like. We saw a lot of production crew that weren't able to get off the stage fast enough. And like I said, many cameras in the shot. It almost felt like that this went back to the old style of doing live shows where you would cut everything manually. You didn't use a program like QPilot or Live Edit. And if you don't know what those programs are, don't worry about it, but essentially it is the software that has enabled Eurovision to just run a little bit smoother in recent years. It has made it so performances can look even better on screen. You can do faster camera cuts, and in general you can do a lot of these things that makes it feel like little music videos. We didn't exactly have a lot of that this year, and like I said, a lot of just awkward camera cuts, which makes me think that this might have been just cut manually, which it makes it look like a lesser production. And if that was all there was to talk about with this production, that would have been fine, I guess. A little bit annoying for production nerds like me, but probably not something that the average viewer noticed. But something that a lot of people did notice was the excessive use of generative AI this year. And it really is the first time that we've seen generative AI being used in Eurovision, at least to this extent. We've seen it in a few music videos prior to this, and we also saw it, the LEDs for Spain's performance at Eurovision this year, but this was the year of the AI. The theme for the postcards this year were these AI avatars, and I can kind of see where they were going with this, and if I do play devil's advocate just for a little bit here, this is something that'll definitely appeal to the kid audience. We have to remember that Junior Eurovision isn't for people like me, 27-year-old sitting in their bedroom talking about the contest. No, this is a show for children and for teenagers. And what do these kids and teenagers love? They love AI. Little bit of generalizing there, but I think you get the idea. This is the hip thing currently that everyone is playing around with. So it makes sense to have that as the kind of a topic of the postcards this year. The execution, however, that's the issue, I feel like. I've seen a lot of wild takes about the use of generative AI this year on different social medias, and I'm not gonna go into most of those. But I think the bottom line, the most important thing here is just the fact that this didn't look good at all. Generative AI, in its relatively short time that it's existed so far, has really evolved quickly, a lot quicker than a lot of us would have imagined, I feel like. And there are definitely ways to do a good AI. There's a lot of ethics and morals that we can talk about at a completely different time when it comes to the use of generative AI and how these things are created in general and models being trained on copyrighted data, all these sorts of things. But there's definitely ways where you can do Gen AI that looks good, and had they gone that route, there would have still been complaints, that's for sure, but I do think it would have been a lot more enjoyable. I feel like the reason why so many people are going after RTVE for this is definitely because it just looked very bad. There's no going around that this is just simply not good AI. This is the cheap kind that anyone can access. And in fact, that's not even just a speculation. That is indeed the thing, because someone noticed that during one of the postcards, I believe it's for the Netherlands, you can actually see a watermark from the Luma AI up in the corner of the screen. Luma AI is essentially this website that lets you create these little AI generated videos, and anyone can basically access this. There are different paid tiers, but if you don't pay, you have, I believe, 5 or 10 videos you can create before you get this watermark on it. I got this a little wrong in the video, but if you go on their website and look at the subscription pricing, you can see to remove the watermark, you actually have to have the standard version, which is this version right here. So I would have imagined that they've had to use this one also because you need it for use in commercial usages. So how the watermark ended up there, I really have no idea. Apparently it's not actually RTVE themselves who did the postcards. They hired a firm in London to create it. That just makes it worse because they clearly paid someone to do this extremely sloppy job that these postcards are. For the budget that RTVE put into this program, I'm sure you could have hired some animators to make something that had that AI feel or that futuristic feel, cartoony feel, but just looked a lot better. The way these postcards look and feel, the many mistakes there are in the AI, and the sometimes weird choices that the AI makes that definitely makes these kids look older than they are in real life. All these things add up to the fact that this feels unprofessional, it feels sloppy, it feels like there weren't a lot of love and care or thought put into this at all. It feels like something that just had to be done quickly so we could move on with other things. Even the graphics that likely weren't produced by AI, they didn't look too great either. I look at something like the recap, for example, which looks like a bad PowerPoint or Canva presentation. And that's just not a good look when you're producing a show on the scale that the Junior Eurovision is. I think it was last year that EBU did touch upon the idea of generative AI in the Eurovision Song Contest, and they talked about the possibility of banning it in contest going forward. It doesn't look like anything came out of the discussion back then, but I definitely think it's about time that they take it up again. Not only because of the backlash that it has received within the fandom this year with the things that we saw at the Junior Eurovision, right? But also just because generative AI is without a doubt here to stay, and like I said in the beginning, it's evolved a lot faster than I think any of us could have expected. And we have to remember that it wasn't only in the postcards we saw AI this year, we also saw a lot of generative AI in the LED backdrops. And again, to play devil's advocate here, I get why some of the broadcasters decided to go down this route. It's just a lot cheaper than hiring animators to do a graphics in the scale that you need for a large LED screen. So while there's a lot of ethics and morals involved in making this decision, if you have a small budget and you have a LED screen that you need to fill in some way because it's a huge part of the screen, either you go down the route of making it super simple and making it look cheap, or you go for the AI and hope it works out. Eurovision in recent years just haven't been a very level playing field, especially with LEDs and big props becoming such a huge thing. You can tell when a country has a huge budget for their performance, and you can similarly tell when they don't have. All of this boils down to the fact that we've now seen that countries and broadcasters are willing to use AI, and they are willing to have AI used on the scale that we saw this year. Remember that the decisions that are made by the host broadcaster have to be approved by the steering group and the EBU before they can actually go ahead and use it. And the head of delegation for Spain has come out and said that the steering group indeed did approve of the postcards being made with AI. So we know that there are at least a good handful of broadcasters within the EBU that are willing and okay with using generative AI like this. So it's come to a point now where the EBU has to make a decision and have to make a set of rules and what they think should be allowed and not should be allowed when it comes to generative AI. And AI in general, and not just for the Eurovision Song Contest, but for the EBU in general, and how public broadcasters should and can use generative AI to their favor. There's a lot of work to be done here for the EBU and for the broadcasters, and I do hope that we see some of these things moving forward, and hopefully we see a set of rules, or at least the EBU stance on it becomes a little bit clearer before the Eurovision in Basel next year. But I've talked enough about AI and all these things now. Let's actually focus on some of the good things that came out of this show. I think the hosts were actually alright. It was nice seeing Ruth Lorenzo back on the Eurovision stage, and definitely nice seeing Melanie again. She was my favorite back in Junior Eurovision in 2019, so seeing her back on stage was wonderful. It was lovely having both Zoe and Sandra, the top two of last year, performing in the beginning in the opening act. And of course having Maria Isabel back, the first and so far only winner for Spain at the Junior Eurovision Song Contest. I was also a huge fan of her back when I was just a little kid and she won back in 2004, so seeing her on stage was awesome. And having those three together as the opening act I think was very smart. I do wish, however, that we would have seen Zoe perform her winning song as an interval act somewhere in the program. I feel like it's tradition and it's always been tradition, so not seeing last year's winner song was a shame. I would have definitely swapped out the weird Spanish man singing a Spanish cover of Maniac. I would have swapped that out for a Zoe interval act, no doubt. And then of course the beautiful interval act by the same guy who did the directing for Ireland at Eurovision Song Contest this year. Sergio Shein. I hope I pronounced that correctly, I probably didn't. But that was a really beautiful performance and really well directed, and a lot better direction and camera work than we saw for any of the acts, which clearly shows that this show really could have been something if some proper direction have been put into it. I keep mentioning a good thing and then I bring up something bad, but that's unfortunately the whole vibe that was around this show. I feel like there were many good ideas and there were many things that could have been great, but they just didn't work out in the end. I want to talk about the top 5 of this year's contest, but before that I have to give an honorable mention to someone that I definitely had no doubts that I was going to be talking about in this video, and then that didn't happen. Spain's Chloe de la Rosa and the song Como una Lola. I had no doubt in my mind that this was gonna go into top 3, and I honestly still don't get what went wrong for this song not to be in top 3. It wasn't even top 3 with the online vote, which in my mind I was speculating if we were gonna get a Vicky Gabo styled result for Chloe, because I imagined that everyone, all of the Spanish fans were tuning in and were excited and were gonna vote for Chloe. I thought this was gonna be in top 3, and I really thought this could win it all. She may not have had the best vocal, but she surely had some of the best charisma on that stage that evening. One of the best stagings overall. I feel like everything was so well put together. This was definitely where the money from RTV had gone into, and the fact that she hasn't really done any TV or any performing before this and just went out and did it so well, I was completely blown away. And Como una Lola is such a fun, upbeat, happy song that anyone can just get up and dance to and feel good about. So how this didn't get in the top 5, I really don't get it. I think she definitely deserved it. But let's get into the top 5, and we're of course starting with a 5th place, which was Malta, Ramirez Chiberres and his song Stella Cigna. This was very unexpected in my opinion, but I definitely think this song came alive on the stage. Also, if I had a nickel for every time that a snow cannon was used in a song coming top 5 this year, I would have had 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. It really feels like that Malta really got behind their entry this year in a way that they don't usually do nearly as much. This also is reflected in the online vote, where Malta got one of their best results since the introduction of the online vote. So there has indeed been some backing and some promotion from the Maltese broadcast and the Maltese public that made this possible. Hopefully this means that we will someday soon see a song fully in Maltese in Eurovision. It was nice hearing it for the first time ever in Junior Eurovision, of course, but we have seen more and more songs in Maltese coming into both the national selection for Eurovision, but also here for Junior Eurovision, and it's just so nice to see. It's a small minority language, not a lot of people know about Maltese. Let's hope that this paves a way for a Maltese song winning Malta Eurovision in the next couple of years. Moving on to 4th place, we have last year's winner, France, Titouan, and the song Comme ci, comme ça. Looking at the different online forums, looking at Twitter, Reddit, Discord, there were a lot of people who were worried that we were gonna get another French win this year, because it has been the case that ever since 2020, France has won the jury vote every single one of those years since. Both the song and the more laid-back, simple performance this year definitely felt different from the French entries that we've seen over the past couple of years. And it makes sense. I think France are in the same situation that Ireland was back in the 90s, where they still want to send something good, but they don't necessarily want to win every single year. But with all that being said, with the song being a little bit more simple and maybe not as appealing for a mainstream audience like some of their past entries have been, and the staging not being as grand and as special as it's been sometimes, I still think a 4th place finish is absolutely deserved. It's not a bad song, it's not a bad performance, and it's definitely not bad vocals we heard Saturday evening. I think a 4th place finish is right where this song should be, and I think French TV is relieved they don't have to host the show next year, and I think the fans are relieved that we are getting yet another year without a French win. We'll of course see what happens next year, but let's not talk about that yet. Let's instead move on to our 3rd place finish from Ukraine. Artem Kotenko and Hear Me Now. This song was definitely one of my favorites going into the contest. I had it as my 2nd place. This to me has worked right from the beginning, and they had a pretty good staging in the national final, so I'm really happy that they went with it for Junior Eurovision as well. This performance and this song feels polished, it feels professional. He performed it very, very well, great vocals, and as well as that, you could really tell that this was a song that meant a lot to him personally. Singing about there being a no place like home is definitely something that I think any Ukrainian, no matter where they are in the world, they can relate to, and I think it's also the reason why we're seeing this song doing so well. A lot of Ukrainians, as well as people sympathizing with Ukraine, of course, came together and voted for this song. It absolutely deserved top 3. I would have been sad if this hadn't been in top 3, and this could have very much been our winner. So I think a 3rd place is very good for this song. It's one of those unfortunate entries, I guess you can say, where it came 2nd with the jury, 2nd with the televote, but because of the differences between the jury and the televote, it ended up being 3rd place. It's something we see every once in a while, but again, a top 3 finish, very much deserved for this song. And then we come to the top 2. A 2nd place this year was Portugal, Victoria Nicole and the song Speranza. I wasn't necessarily 100% on board with this song, but I know a lot of people loved it. This was the big fan favorite, so there's no surprise that it won the televote. I haven't seen the jury performance, so I don't know if it was lesser than the performance that we saw on the Saturday evening, but I think this definitely deserved to come in that sub 3, and I think it very much could have won if the jury had voted a little differently. It does what Portugal does best. It's a simple song with a simple staging where everything just works to create this magical and beautiful atmosphere that sucks you in and makes you pay attention for the 3 minutes it plays. Victoria is a wonderful performer. Again, no one really knew who she was when she auditioned for The Voice Kids in Portugal, but she is definitely a star in the making, and I think we'll see her in Festival de Canção in the future. And maybe not as a singer, but maybe just as a songwriter, because we have to remember this song was written 100% by Victoria with a little help from her voice mentors. We don't get a lot of self-written songs in Junior Eurovision anymore, so it's always nice when we see them, and especially when we see one that's so well written as this one doing so well. I feel like a lot of people think that winning Eurovision or Junior Eurovision is the only way to really get success, but I don't think that's the case. Victoria managed to get Portugal their best result in the Junior Eurovision, but also their second best result ever in any Eurovision competition. And that's no small feat. She's just as much of a winner as the eventual winner from Georgia, and I think her and her team should be extremely proud of this performance and this placing. But let's get to it. First place finish from Georgia. Andrea Podmic with the song To My Mom. Again, just like I said with Malta, I don't think anyone had seen this coming. I've seen a lot of people having this relatively low on their scores going into the contest, and personally, this song never really connected with me either. But I've definitely seen a lot more love for the song after the contest, or during the contest, I guess you can say. I can definitely acknowledge that the staging and the storytelling that happened there 100% elevated this song. When I think Georgia, I don't necessarily think really grand and good stagings, but this is definitely one of the best that they've ever done, and I think it really helped to tell the story that they wanted to tell with this song. But unfortunately, the song and the win is currently overshadowed by the fact that this mainly won because it got such a large amount of jury points. So many, in fact, that it broke the scoreboard. Not that it takes much to break the graphics this year, it seems like, but it did. If there's one thing to take away from the new voting system, which we will talk about in a second, it is that it was very clear for anyone to see how little countries actually got 12 points from the juries this year. Georgia was there vacuuming almost every single 12 point, and it made it impossible for someone like Portugal, despite their high televoting win, to actually go ahead and win it. It's an issue that seems to come up a lot more now than it used to do in Eurovision contest, where the jury winner is... The margin is so big there that it's almost impossible for any other country to win. It's an issue, and I know a lot of people feel like it's become such a big of an issue now that the EBU do have to do something about it. Whether they do that or not, I guess time will tell, but I do see why some people do sometimes get a little discouraged and may not want to actually spend the money to vote for their favorites when the juries have so much power. But I really don't think it should overshadow some of the wonderful winners that we've had in recent years, both in Eurovision and here in Junior Eurovision. While not being one of my favorites, Georgia definitely deserved the win this year, and they are now back as the most winning country of the Junior Eurovision. Which definitely huge props and huge congratulations to them for that. It's quite impressive for a show that's only been around for these 20 or so years to have actually won this contest 4 times, and in general how many times Georgia has come in top 5 really show how much of a Junior Eurovision powerhouse they are. Before we wrap up, I do want to talk briefly about this weird way of during the voting that we saw this year. It has come out since that this was indeed an idea of RTVE and a different way of trying to announce the votes this year to try to eliminate some of the stress that we have seen in past years, where some of these very young performers get quite stressed out during the voting sequence. This, however, I don't think is the way to do it. And I don't really necessarily either think that it really solved the main issue, which is that split screen at the end. Announcing all the 1 through 10 points in like one big pile, sure, it speeds up the voting. It may have sped it up a little bit too much this year, I feel like. But I don't think it really adds anything, and if anything, it really takes away the excitement. If you see a country doing really well from that like 1 to 8 or 10 points, it doesn't take much to realize, okay, if it's doing so good now, it means that country has gotten a 0, 12 points, and they likely won't win. So it takes away a lot of the excitement for the viewer, I feel like. And the spokespersons being recorded and just being shown as a video, I can see some of the benefits there, of course, but I would worry if this was implemented in the Eurovision Song Contest, if it could cause some issue. Could these pre-recorded videos be leaked ahead of time and you would know the jury winner before the show even took place? I can definitely see some issues there. I don't think it's as big of an issue in Junior Eurovision, but if they were to port this to Eurovision, it could produce some issues. In general, I don't think this way of announcing points would work, especially not when you have 40 or so countries voting. But I don't think it's gonna come. I don't think it's gonna come to the Eurovision because, like I said, it seems like the reason that they went ahead and tried this out this year was because they wanted to make a voting system that weren't so stressful for the participating children. But I don't think this is the way to do it. And I think they have to go back to the drawing board for next year and figure out how can we actually present these votes in a way that works and also takes that pressure away. I definitely think the way of doing it is the way that we've seen in a lot of Scandinavian countries for their junior shows, where you essentially just announce the top 3. You don't announce how many points they got, but you tell who got 3rd place, 2nd place, and 1st place, and then you don't know how the rest did, so you will never know as a kid performer if you actually came last. Of course, it would take away some of the voting sequence fun that we're so used to. It really is part of the Eurovision DNA, but I think if the focus really is on trying to make this less stressful for the kids, I think that's the way of doing it. Junior Eurovision 2024 will be looked back upon as a show where a lot of things went wrong and where they tried to do some new things, but everything just kind of felt flat. I don't think I need to say it again, but I'll do it anyways. I wasn't very impressed with the contest this year. And after this contest, I've just seen a lot of people on social media saying the same thing that we saw when Italy hosted Eurovision, and that is that Spain should never host the contest again, which is of course a shame. I hope they do win eventually, and I hope they get to host again because I do think they can redeem themselves and produce a better show. 2024 has just been a weird year in general, being a Eurovision fan. It's been a wild year to follow with everything that went on in Malmö, and then we have all the AI talk of the Junior Eurovision. I think it's important at this time to at least try to be hopeful and hope that next year will be better. I guess only time will tell. And the same goes for if we will actually be going to Georgia for next year's show. I know that the Georgian broadcaster definitely want to put on a show next year, and I have no doubt that they can produce something fun and something hopefully a little better than what we saw in 2017. Armenia definitely managed to redeem themselves going from their hosting in 2011 up until what they did in 2022. So it is possible, I feel like, for Georgia to do something even better than what we saw in 2017. But with some of the political choices, I guess you can say that Georgia have taken in recent times, and the fact that the Georgian government wants to take more control over the broadcaster, it can eventually mean that, well, first of all, it can mean that if they go ahead and take more control, which means that they won't be an independent broadcaster, it could mean that Georgian TV will be suspended from the EBU in the same way that we saw happen to Belarus, which obviously then means that they won't be able to host next year, but it also could mean that we see less countries participating next year if we do end up going to Georgia, because there could be a situation similar to how Germany weren't able to send an entry to Armenia. If the broadcasters don't feel safe sending a delegation to Georgia, we could potentially see less countries next year. We'll see if we do end up going to Georgia, or if we'll go to Portugal or some other way, but I have no doubt that the EBU are already looking into the possibilities of what they can do right now, and even if Georgia do get announced as the host country for next year, I'm sure that a plan B will be put in place to make sure that the show can go ahead even if we aren't able to go to Georgia anyway. But those were my thoughts on the Junior Eurovision 2024. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more Neon Pavilion content, and then I'll hopefully see you guys for the next video. Take care.